If you have ever found yourself feeling completely fine one minute and then spiraling the next, just because somebody took a little bit longer to reply, or because their tone just felt a little bit off, a little bit different, because something just didn't feel right and you couldn't even logically explain, then this video is going to land very close to home. Today I want to unpack everything about anxious attachment style, what it actually is, where it comes from, and how to know if you've got it and how it shows up, not just in relationships, but also across your whole life. And most importantly, why it's not something that you are stuck with. Because I need you to understand this thing that from the beginning, anxious attachment is not your personality, it's not your identity, and it absolutely is not your forever destiny, okay? It is a learned nervous system pattern, and when it can be learned, it can be unlearned. So, let's just zoom out for a moment. There are 4 different kind of attachment styles that psychologists talk about. We've got secure, anxious, avoidant, and fearful avoidant, which is essentially a mix of anxious and avoidant tendencies. Secure attachment is the grounded, emotionally steady baseline, someone who can connect so deeply, but also doesn't lose themselves in the process. Avoidant attachment tends to withdraw when things get too close. Fearful avoidance swings between craving closeness and then pushing it away. And then anxious attachment, the one that we're focusing on today, is characterized by a deep fear of abandonment and overactivation around connection. Now, this is something that I want to be very clear about, is that anxious attachment is not needy in the way people throw that word around, and it is definitely not a weakness, okay? This is not like an irrational drama thing. It is a nervous system learnt response that you learnt very early on, that love feels inconsistent. So let me give you a real life example. You're dating somebody. Things have been going really well and you've been speaking consistently, and then one day they take longer than usual to reply. Logically, you know that they might be at work, or they might be at the gym, or with friends, or have a really busy living their life, but your body reacts before logic kicks in. Your chest tightens, you pick up the phone, you check the message again, you reread what you last sent, wondering if you said something wrong. You start replaying the conversations or the last time you saw them, and you start analysing their tone and their facial expressions, the way that they hugged you goodbye, all of the things. And then suddenly, you're not just waiting for a reply anymore, you're questioning whether you're about to be abandoned. And that reaction is not about the text message itself, it's about what your nervous system believes the delay in the response means. And for somebody with anxious attachment, a small shift in behaviour can feel like the beginning of that abandonment or that loss. So how do you know if it is you? Anxious attachment often shows up as hyper-awareness in relationships. You're so attuned to changes in energy. You feel amazing when things feel so close and connected, and you feel so deeply unsettled when they feel distant. Okay, you may need a little bit more assurance more frequently than you'd like to admit, and you might find yourself over-explaining or apologising quickly or trying to soothe any kind of tension before it even becomes real tension. And the reality is, because of this, you might stay in situations longer when you really they don't fully meet your standards, right? The fear of losing that connection, the fear of feeling abandoned overruns everything. And so one of the biggest signs is that your sense of worth subtly kind of rises and falls depending on how chosen you feel. So if someone is leaning in, you feel secure, but if they're leaning away from you, that self-abandonment grows quicker. Now, where does this all begin? Because it's not like you just wake up one day and decide that you're anxiously attached and that's what you're like for the rest of your 20s. Attachment styles are formed very early on in your childhood, usually between around birth and when you're about 7 years old, when your brain is highly absorbent of all the things around you. And during that time, your nervous system is gathering all the different pieces of evidence about whether the world is safe or whether connection is reliable and how to make friends and your identity. And if you're a child whose caregiver is loving, but sometimes can be inconsistent, sometimes warm, sometimes not, sometimes distracted, overwhelmed, or emotionally unavailable, or just unpredictable in general, that child learns that love exists, but it's not guaranteed. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. And because that connection equals survival when you are small, your nervous system adapts by becoming hyper aware. So it might learn that if I am good, helpful, funny, quiet, high achieving, or low maintenance, I'm more likely to have love. Or it might learn that I need to monitor my moods to stay safe. Or it might learn that I must work for closeness, like I must prove myself to people. And none of these beliefs are consciously chosen. They are just pure survival strategies that we adopted. And that strategy works fine when you're 5, but it does not serve you when you are 30 and you're trying to build an equal, healthy relationship. It just doesn't work. So in adulthood, that early programming shows up when somebody pulls back slightly and your body reacts as though something essential is being literally taken away from you. You might text more, you might seek clarity more, you might feel the urge to fix things that aren't actually broken. And it's not because you're an irrational person, but it's because your nervous system is trying to prevent that familiar pain. Now, here's something that people don't always realize is that your anxious attachment does not limit itself in romantic relationship. It often bleeds into friendships and work and even money. Like in friendships, you might overgive out of fear of being left out. You might feel unsettled if someone seems quieter than usual. Or in your career, you may tie your sense of value to praise and external validation. Like if your boss is happy, then you feel secure. If they're critical or distant, you question yourself. With money, anxious attachment can show up as scarcity, like a constant background fear of not having enough or losing stability or needing just reassurance through those numbers in your bank account. And the reality is that underneath all of this, it's the same core belief that I am safe when I am chosen and when I am approved of. So the really important part is that it's all changeable. But not through pretending that you don't care, not through forcing yourself to be cool, not through blocking somebody and just hoping that it all disappears, because you can never shame your nervous system into a form of security. Security is built by slowly teaching your body that you are safe even when connection fluctuates. And that starts with the awareness. So the next time that you feel that similar urge of panic, instead of just reacting immediately, just pause and name what it is that you're feeling. Notice that tightness in your chest, notice the racing thoughts, and acknowledge that this is your nervous system reacting to a perceived threat, not necessarily a real one. And then from there, just separate the feelings from the facts, right? Feeling anxious does not equal that you are being abandoned. Feeling scared does not equal something is wrong. And then you just begin building safety internally. And when your entire emotional stability depends on somebody else's consistency, you always cling to that consistency. But when you start keeping promises to yourself and you start building routines, strengthening relationships, pursuing goals, and creating a life that feels so solid outside of your romantic side, your nervous system slowly learns that connection actually enhances your life and it does not define your survival. But the reality is if you do not work on your anxious attachment, you will continue being drawn to dynamics that trigger it, because your nervous system is wired towards familiarity. And you may confuse that intensity with chemistry or unpredictability with passion and anxiety with love, and that cycle can repeat quietly for years. And the difference is that secure love feels different. It feels steady, it's consistent, it's clear. And if you were so used to choosing chaos, steadiness might feel boring or unfamiliar. And that doesn't mean that boring or unfamiliar is wrong. It just means that your nervous system isn't being activated, right? So it's not about becoming really detached or cold. It's about becoming more grounded in who you are. It's about being able to say, look, I want you instead of I need you to feel okay. And when that shift changes, everything else will change. Like I said, your life, your work, your friendships, your relationship with money, because the moment that you start recognizing that this pattern is what it is, you now have the space to interrupt it. And so now every single time that you choose self-respect over the fear, or calm over the chasing or panic or anything to do with anxious attachment, you start understanding that actually you aren't too much. It's just that you've learned that you should hold tightly because love once felt so uncertain. But now you get to learn what it feels like to stand securely in yourself, whether somebody stays or whether somebody goes. You now know how that should feel, and that's where the whole world will open up. But I hope that this has been useful for you. It's been a bit of a brain dump, and I will see you at the next one. Bye.